The age-old question, what rear axle do I have? Well, short and sweet. This is a Dana 35. This is a Chrysler 8 1/4. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the... No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of ways to tell what rear axle you have, and a whole bunch of reasons you want to know that information. In this video, I'll focus on the XJ and MJ, but the axles are visually the same in ZJs, WJs, KJs, YJs, you know, a bunch of other similar models from the era. To clarify real quick, we're only talking about the rear axle in this video, not the front. All four-wheel drive XJs have some variant of the Dana 30 in the front, so there should be no confusing that. From 1984 to 2001, the Cherokee had three rear axle options: the Dana 35, the Dana 44, and the Chrysler 8.25, otherwise known as the 8 1/4. The Dana 35 is easily differentiated by its rounded bottom edge, whereas the Chrysler 8 1/4 is unmistakably flat. The Dana 44 is kind of obvious, it's this weird triangle shape-ish, I don't know. So, the 35 is the weakest axle, and the 44 is the strongest axle, with the 8 1/4 sitting somewhere in between. Most older XJs have the Dana 35, and most newer XJs have the Chrysler 8 1/4. The Dana 44 was only available in a rare towing package available from 1987 to 91, so chances are you don't have it. So the Dana 35 was available for every year and was the only option for 84 through 86. More confusingly, the Dana 35 had two versions. From 1984 to 89, it's a non-C-clip axle where the shafts are held in by 4 bolts behind the brake drums. From 1990 and beyond, it's a C-clip axle where the shafts are secured internally by, you guessed it, C-clips. Generally speaking, the non-C-clip version is a little stronger than its later counterpart, not that the Dana 35 is that strong anyway. From 1984 to 96 and 2001, if you have an XJ with anti-lock brakes, you have the Dana 35. But, just because you have a Dana 35 does not mean you have anti-lock brakes. For 97 to 2000 models, having a Dana 35 does mean you have anti-lock brakes. The Chrysler 8 1/4 was available from 1991 to 2001 and is a solid middle ground axle. If you have the 8.25, your Jeep does not have anti-lock brakes. As for the Comanche, the Dana 35 was standard for all years. Ignore the fact that this is orange, by the way. They're not usually orange. I just did that because I don't... Anyway, the optional metric ton package for the long bed MJ had the AMC 20 for 1986 and the Dana 44 for 1987 to 92. So, all short bed MJs have a Dana 35. This all, of course, assumes a previous owner hasn't swapped in a different axle. A common upgrade is the Ford 8.8, which looks like this, or a Dana 60, which looks like this. Through the years, the axles have different spline counts, so they aren't interchangeable with each other. Generally speaking, the more splines in the axle shafts, the stronger it is. All Dana 35s are 27 spline, all Dana 44s are 30 spline, the 91 to 96 Chrysler 8 1/4 is 27 spline, the 97 to 2001 Chrysler 8 1/4 is 29 spline. There are some accounts of the 96 8 1/4s being 29 spline. It's a weird year for the XJ, so I'm not sure about 96. The XJ came with a handful of gear ratios depending on engine, transmission, and other equipped options. The easiest way to tell is to locate the tag on the differential cover, but often because these vehicles are older than time itself, the tag may not be there. Here's a quick table for commonly equipped XJ gear ratios. You can pause the video here or listen to my very monotone and uninteresting voice tell you, for example, my XJ has the 4.0 in automatic, meaning it's got 355 gears, while my MJ has the 4.0 with a manual, meaning it has 307 gears. Differentials usually aren't very picky about what type of fluid you put in them, but regardless, there are factory requested oils for each one listed on this table. If you don't know whether or not you have a limited slip differential, an easy way to tell is back up the back end, spin one of the wheels. If the opposite side spins in the same direction, it's an LSD. If it spins in the opposite direction, as shown here, it's just a plain old open differential. As mentioned earlier, the Dana 35 is the weakest of the available axles. There is no one failure point. The whole thing isn't worth much beyond daily driving. I use my MJ for nothing more than cruising around, and this axle does just fine for me. If I were to lift it and equip bigger tires, I'd go with something beefier, be a Dana 44 or a Ford 8.8. The Chrysler 8 1/4 isn't really the strongest axle, but it is a reliable starting point. There's a fair amount of aftermarket support for it, and it'll do just fine for anybody not driving their Jeep up a vertical wall while towing my ex's ego. The Dana 44 is the best available factory option, but finding one for an XJ is going to be pretty difficult, and even if you can find one, it'll probably be more expensive than a whole used Cherokee. So I don't have either of my Jeeps lifted or modified. I'm a pretty stock guy. Even so, the MJ has 120,000 miles on it, the Cherokee has 220,000 miles on it, and the Chrysler 8 1/4 is doing better than the Dana 35. The Dana 35 has a bad pinion bearing, so it's spewing gear oil all over the place. And the Chrysler 8 1/4 with 100,000 more miles on it is still operating at peak efficiency. So, like I said, I don't really put these axles through anything beyond daily driving, but I know the Comanche was abused by its previous owners, so that could be at fault. I know they twisted the drive shaft. Like, I guess he tried to rip a tree stump out of the ground or something. You can actually see the rear bumper is like ripped off of the truck. So I don't know what he did with this thing, but I'm pretty sure that is related to the fact that the Dana 35 isn't doing so great in this thing. Anyway, that's all. I'm going to shut up now. Thank you all for watching. If you have any video ideas, let me know.